All right. Welcome. This is the Washington Examiner. We are live here with Libertarian Party candidate Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico.
Sean?
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. We'd like to start off by talking about trade issues, if we could. This is an unusual election cycle in which we have two major party candidates who are flatly running against trade. Can you give us your thoughts the Libertarian Party is understood to be free trade. Do you think it should be completely, and are you of that tradition? Do you think it should be complete and unfettered?
I do think it should be complete and unfettered. Free markets, I think that's how we dominate the world. But that said, I'm looking to get elected President of the United States. If I get elected President of the United States, if legislation passes that makes trade better, count on my signature.
Okay. So let's start with some of the recent things that the legislation that we have seen. For example, Trade Promotion Authority. On the one hand, it does make trade deals easier to get the approval from the U.S. and get in them. On the other hand, there's the argument that the Congress is sort of usurping its role by giving away some of its authority in trade promotion. Where do you stand on that? Do you think TPA was a good idea?
Well, I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors combined when I was governor of New Mexico. So I go into these trade deals skeptical. Is it promoting crony capitalism? Is it government interference in a situation where it would work better as free market? Well, I think that's really the case all the time. But what's currently in place, and how is this legislation going to improve on that? Sean, I really don't even want to say if this, in fact, will or won't improve on it. TPA, or the TPPA, what's being
the Trans-Pacific
Partnership. I'm skeptical that contains a whole lot of crony capitalism, government interference. But the people that are helping me out with this, people that I really respect, say that the legislation actually improves on trade. So given that, I'd have to say I was going to sign it, that I would sign it, but devil's in the details, and I hope people would appreciate that I would be that skeptic at the table.
So it's a sort of tentative yes, but you're still not completely 100% sold?
I'm not completely 100% sold, but I will tell you, all the people that I greatly respect that are helping me out in this say that it's an improvement and that I should support it.
Again.
Is it difficult at all for you to take that message to workers who have seen their jobs moved overseas or who have lost their jobs because of, or who attribute the loss of their jobs to?
What's not being seen are the opportunities that are created with free market. So the other day somebody was talking to me about steel and the fact, China's dumping steel on the United States. That's jobs that steel producers here in the United States lose out on. Well, you know what? If China wants to subsidize their steel, who benefits from that? Well, it's us buying their steel and being able to build more steel buildings. How many jobs are going to get created because of steel erection taking place because we're able to buy steel 30% cheaper than what we should be able to buy it for because China is subsidizing it? I just think that any subsidization that happens in the case of China, for example, we're the ones that are going to be at an advantage, and we should try and take advantage of that. And ultimately, it's not sustainable on their end. But that's free market as opposed to government injecting itself.
If I may, I know we're trying to keep the focus on economic issues here, but there was some big news made yesterday with the FBI decision not to recommend criminal charges against Hillary Clinton. And I want to get your take on that because I know you've previously said that you do not believe Secretary Clinton had criminal intent with the way that she handled emails as at the helm of the State Department. After hearing all of the findings that the FBI found in their investigation, after hearing the press conference yesterday with FBI Director James Comey, do you still think that there wasn't any criminal intent, or do you think that she is guilty of wrongdoing?
I'm just, I'm not the one to lend judgment in all this. There's so many others that weigh in on these issues. Hillary Clinton and her emails, Donald Trump and his business transactions. I think bad judgment was really at the core of everything that transpired. Was there criminal intent? I never did think there was criminal intent. But I'm not the stone thrower here. I'm really not. There's so many others that focus on this, and I'd like to focus on economic issues, on issues of the day, trying to drive that middle swath that most Americans, I think, want to see us all go down, and that is we've got some issues economically, jobs, personal choices in our lives, ending the drug war, stopping with these military interventions that I think are making the world less safe, not more safe.
Getting back to trade for a second and the issue of jobs, I mean, one of the main arguments that's made against it is that it makes it easier for U.S. companies to outsource jobs to foreign countries. Is that something that the government can and should be preventing? Can it be prevented at all?
Well, as President of the United States, when it comes to tax policy, count on me to sign legislation that simplifies taxes or reduces taxes. If I could wave a magic wand, I would eliminate corporate tax, income tax, and abolish the IRS, and I would replace all of it with one single federal consumption tax. I ask everyone to look at the fair tax, which is a proposed piece of legislation on how to dot the I's and cross the T's when it comes to accomplishing one federal consumption tax. But Sean, if we have zero corporate tax in this country, tens of millions of jobs will get created in this country as opposed to anywhere else, because why would you start up or grow a business and jobs anywhere in the world other than the United States if there was a zero corporate tax rate?
Are there any other federal agencies or departments that you would get rid of? I mean,
as president of the United States, Congress works it out that they want to abolish an agency and sends me the legislation. I'm going to sign it, no matter what it is. Okay, unless it's the Republicans and they want to abolish Planned Parenthood, which I think is just wrong-headed. I mean, why do we keep going down this social dogma agenda? But count on me to sign any legislation that abolishes any federal agency. But if I could wave a magic wand, let's start with education. I live in New Mexico. New Mexico sends Washington 13 cents and they get back 11 cents. That's going through the wash and dry cycle in a bureaucratic wash and dry cycle that somehow siphons off that money. You don't get all that money back. And then they tell you that you have to spend 15 cents to get your 11 cents. So now they're siphoning off another 4 cents of state money that the state could be spending on education, as opposed to the federal government telling you what you have to do to garner these federal funds, which arguably shouldn't be theirs in the first place. So the Department of Education really is at the top of the list. Housing and urban development, I think they've far outgrown their usefulness. And that it's really not an issue in this country anymore, that they are needed. Those are a couple that come to mind.
Speaking of education, one issue in particular that's really important to young people like myself is college debt.
Yes.
And just earlier today we saw Secretary Clinton announce that she's expanding her debt-free college proposals. Bernie Sanders has said let's eliminate college tuition altogether. What is your plan to rein in college debt and, if anything, offer students some relief from the debt that they may already carry?
Well, the main reason for the high cost of college tuition is guaranteed government student loans. If guaranteed government student loans were to have never existed, I guarantee you that college tuition would be half of what it is today. Because college tuition, colleges and universities are absolutely immune to market forces, supply and demand. The government has skewed the supply side of this by guaranteeing government student loans. I think students have been sold a bill of goods. And when it comes to interest rates, as President of the United States, I would love to see a piece of legislation that somehow fixes the interest rate at a much lower level than what students are currently on the hook for right now. Rule of 72, if you've got a student loan and it's a 7% interest, that's a doubling of the debt in 10 years.
All right.
Democrats and liberals are pushing for a higher minimum wage as high as $15 an hour at the federal level. Several states and cities have adopted that. What do you think the minimum wage should be, or should we have one at all?
I think everybody's missing the boat. I think we should go straight to $75 an hour. I mean, come on, let's really be prosperous. Well, I think when you say $75 an hour, I think people get it. Well, gee, we can't do 75. Well, how is it that we can do 15? Come on, minimum wage is minimum wage, and the government's going to determine that minimum wage? I do not think government should be involved in this. I think it eliminates jobs. I think that people starting out in the job market, that they should be given all the opportunity they can to get the jobs that may or may not be available. But government picking a number, and they're going to pick $15, and gee, how does that work with the accompanying inflation that always goes along with this? That in my lifetime, I'm sure that McDonald's hamburger at some point is going to be $6.
Would you keep the existing $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage, or would you move to abolish it?
I wouldn't. I would sign legislation to abolish it. I don't think it should be established. And having been in business, having employed 1,000 people myself, minimum wage was never an issue, meaning somebody that showed up on time and wore clean clothes, you know what? That was not a minimum wage job. That was something much higher.
I want to ask this question that's popping up from somebody who's watching right now. In this election cycle particularly, you know, you're somebody who's run for president before, but do you think that with the growing frustration with Washington and with politicians like Hillary Clinton and people like Donald Trump, do you think that there is a route for you to keep either candidate from reaching the 270 electoral votes?
As crazy as this political season is, I might be the next president. I mean, I would not be doing this if that weren't a possibility. And yeah, it's a possibility to keep the other two from getting 270 electoral votes, but I have a sense that if I'm in the presidential debates, which is being at 15% in the polls, which I think will happen if my name is just included as the third name, I think I'll be in the presidential debates, and I think myself and Bill Weld, my running mate, I think we could actually get elected. It will be about the strangest thing ever, but this is the strangest ever presidential election.
Do you plan to focus on any states in particular that where you've seen a libertarian streak? I know states like New Hampshire
when you look out west, Bill Weld's got a list when it comes to the East, but yeah, New Hampshire, Vermont, this would be Bill Weld's list, but my list in the West would be Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, the Dakotas, Alaska. Yeah, there's several states that could be contended.
Should we ask the?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and ask that as well.
Go
Another
ahead.
question from the audience here. One thing that people have mentioned that could happen this election cycle, I know you just spoke about crazy possibilities occurring, is that the House of Representatives could decide the election if no candidate reaches that 270 electoral vote threshold. Is that a possibility that you...
It is a possibility, and here's a little bit of information. Maybe I want the two of you to honestly respond. If you know the answer, you realize that if it goes to the House of Representatives, it's one state, one vote. South Dakota is equal to California. So if it goes to the House of Representatives and it goes beyond one vote, if that happens, so nobody gets 270 electoral votes in the election, goes to the House of Representatives, one state, one vote, goes beyond the first ballot, I could be the next president of the United States. And they only allow 3 names.
Right, the 3 top vote getters.
And if they continue to vote and don't get a majority, then the Speaker of the House temporarily becomes the President of the United States. But it is temporary. It's
Which
not
many
permanent.
Republicans would like to see at this point.
Well, but there is an now I'm not. Maybe you have the answer. What's the end of the fuse when it comes to vote totals? I think I think people in this country would get awfully upset if it continues to be gridlock after gridlock.
It sounds like, though, you've been looking up the rules for elections thrown to the House.
Well, or I've had so many interviews, none have been as good as this, not one. But there's a lot of education that goes along with these interviews, too.
Getting a bit back to some economic issues, we've had 4 states in the last 4 years adopt right-to-work laws, the most since about the 1950s. Unless I'm mistaken, New Mexico doesn't have such a law. Do you support them? Do you think there should be a national standard? What do you think of that issue?
Well, I support it, absolutely. I think that you shouldn't have to belong to a union to get a job, and it's just that simple. It doesn't exist in New Mexico. I think that states that have adopted right to work prosper more.
Okay. Is there any changes or amendments that you would make to the National Labor Relations Act?
Well, the devil's in the details, but Congress could certainly be doing those kinds of things, and I'd certainly be amenable to looking at changes, and by changes, just making it easier to be able to get a job.
I'm going to ask another question that an audience member posed. What would be the first issue that you would tackle as president?
Same as I did as governor. I would immerse myself in the dollars and cents, as governor, dollars and cents of state government, President of the United States, dollars and cents. How much money is coming in? How much is going out? What's the actual dollar amounts? And start looking at how to shrink the size and scope of government, believing that by doing that, all of us will have more liberty, more freedom, and that's because there'll be more money in our pockets. And there are some big issues that really need to be addressed. The entitlements, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. Look, we're going to drive over a fiscal cliff here if we don't address these issues. And neither Trump or Clinton are talking at all about reforming the entitlements. It's just stay the course. Well, staying the course is going to be driving over the cliff.
Can entitlements be reformed in any meaningful way? I mean, is it politically feasible?
I believe so. In my heart of hearts, Medicaid and Medicare both need to be devolved to the states. As governor of New Mexico, if the federal government would have given me a fixed amount of money, say based on the prior year, and that I needed to draw new lines of eligibility to make that money work, in my heart of hearts, those that do need a safety net would have received it, and we'd have done it for a lot less money. I say 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, the states. There will be some fabulous success if we'll do that. There'll also be horrible failure, but we'll all emulate the success. And Social Security, I mean, raising the retirement age for starters. Look, it's insolvent in the future. It's going to be insolvent. It has to be addressed. And if we're going to put our heads in the sand, electing a president that's not going to acknowledge that and take part in the debate and the discussion over how we do reform Social Security so that it is viable in the future, look, I think we all understand that, but Trump and Clinton don't, or that this is somehow going to be the ticket to getting elected and then reelected.
The Labor Department recently changed the rules for overtime. They basically expanded the number of people who are covered by the rule for time and a half after 40 hours by about twice. Do you think that was the right thing to do?
No, it's not. It's a decision. I mean, as long as you're not forced to have to work, forcing an employee to have to work, well, that's the time and a half. I'm not sure what these new rules are that you're talking about, but based on the sound of it, it's just going to amount to less overtime. It's people not having the opportunity to work because employers are going to decide that it costs too much money. They're just not going to expand.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience. Do you still support a national sales tax?
Well, I wouldn't call it a consumption tax. One federal consumption tax. Mm-hmm. If I could wave my magic wand. Now, the problem with a national sales tax in and of itself is if we adopt a national sales tax, then it's just going to be an add-on tax to what we currently have, and that's not something that I'm proposing here at all. Abolish income tax, abolish corporate tax, eliminate the 16th Amendment, which allows for income tax in the first place, and then convert all that over to one federal consumption tax. Imagine life without the IRS.
We're heading into the last few weeks before both parties, major political parties, hold their national conventions, and a lot of the news over the next 3 weeks is going to be dominated by Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. What do you plan to do to stay relevant and try and get to that 15% threshold where you can participate in the debates going into November?
I have to believe now, the longer this interview goes along, that this interview in and of itself will probably get me to 17%. So thank you both.
We're doing all we can, sir.
With that, I think we can end the interview.
All right.
Yeah, thank you so much,
thank you
Governor,
very
for
much,
joining
Debbie.
us today. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking questions
You
from
bet.
the
You
audience.
bet.
We really appreciate it.
Great.
It's great to
Thanks.
see you in the
Thanks.
examiner's
Good to see you.
office.